Ever notice how the people most obsessed with proving their alpha status often seem the most insecure? It's one of life's cruelest ironies. The harder someone tries to display dominance, the more it reveals their underlying fears. Carl Jung understood this paradox nearly a century ago. While working with patients struggling with power and identity, he wrote, "What you resist not only persists but grows in size." This wasn't some motivational quote on Instagram. It came from a man who spent decades confronting his own shadow and helping others do the same. Jung would look at our modern obsession with alpha mentality, the billion-dollar masculinity industry, the constant performance of strength on social media, and laugh, not because he was cruel but because he saw what we're only beginning to realize. What we call alpha is often just compensation, and compensation is the enemy of authentic power. And here's the twist that might change everything about how you approach personal power. True strength isn't found in dominance over others, but in mastery over yourself. Jung would find our modern alpha culture both amusing and disturbing. The man who wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely," would surely see our alpha industry as another flawed system promising salvation through performance rather than integration. What Jung understood is that we've been sold a false bill of goods. We chase alpha status like it's a destination, a psychological state we can permanently achieve if we just follow the right steps, read the right books, or buy the right products. But this fundamentally misunderstands both human psychology and life itself. By attempting to segregate ourselves into alphas and betas, we create internal division that leads to psychological suffering. The consequences are everywhere: skyrocketing rates of male depression and anxiety, relationship dysfunction, and a culture of posturing that leaves everyone feeling inadequate. The real cost isn't just personal unhappiness, it's the loss of authentic connection with ourselves and others. At the core of Jung's philosophy are several key ideas that flip conventional wisdom about power and identity on its head. First is individuation, not domination over others but the integration of all parts of oneself, including those we label as weak or undesirable. Unlike the alpha mentality that rejects vulnerability, individuation embraces it as the path to wholeness. Then there's the shadow, those disowned parts of ourselves that we project onto others. The typical alpha male performance is often just shadow projection, rejecting in others what we fear in ourselves. As Jung put it, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Finally, his concept of the authentic self isn't about superiority over others but about transcending social masks, including our simplistic ideas about strength and weakness. The central problem isn't that alpha status eludes us, it's that we've misconceived what strength actually means. We chase external validation and wonder why we feel empty inside. We perform toughness and wonder why we feel fragile. We avoid vulnerability and wonder why we stop growing. What if being alpha isn't something to be pursued directly at all? What if, as Jung suggested, true power is merely the byproduct of becoming fully yourself? Perhaps in our obsession with appearing strong, we've forgotten what it means to be strong. Jung's insights weren't merely academic musings, they emerged from profound personal struggle. In his midlife, Jung experienced what he called a confrontation with the unconscious, a period of intense psychological turmoil that nearly broke him. Rather than doubling down on control and rationality, the alpha response, Jung did something revolutionary. He surrendered to the process. He began documenting his dreams, visions, and imaginings in his famous Red Book, embracing rather than suppressing his inner chaos. A tech executive I worked with exemplifies this transformation. After years of alpha leadership, intimidating colleagues, demanding perfection, hiding any sign of weakness, he faced a crisis when his company failed. "I followed the alpha playbook perfectly," he told me. I did everything the business gurus said would make me successful. But I drove away talented people and couldn't adapt when things changed. Through therapy, he began integrating his disowned qualities: uncertainty, compassion, vulnerability. The irony is that I'm actually more effective now, he explained. I can listen to other perspectives, admit when I don't know something, and build authentic trust. What looked like weakness turned out to be strength. In leadership, Jung's insights change everything. Rather than seeking to dominate or impress others, true leaders pursue authentic influence that comes from integration of all their qualities. The modern obsession with commanding respect often misses that genuine respect isn't commanded but earned through wholeness. As Jung observed, where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, love is lacking. Consider how this transforms approach to teamwork. Instead of positioning yourself at the top of a hierarchy, create conditions where everyone can contribute their authentic strengths. In relationships, the alpha mentality creates countless problems. The conventional approach teaches men to hide vulnerability and maintain control, creating emotional distance. A Jungian approach instead values wholeness, showing up with your full humanity rather than a carefully curated image. One couple I counseled had been stuck in classic alpha dynamic problems. He couldn't express emotions except anger. She couldn't respect his periodic uncertainty. When they began practicing what I call integrated intimacy, embracing both strength and vulnerability in both partners, their connection deepened. We stopped performing roles and started being people, the husband explained. Even fitness, the stereotypical alpha domain, transforms through Jung's lens. Rather than exercising to dominate or impress, approach your body as something to understand and integrate. A former bodybuilder I interviewed described this shift. I used to work out from hating my weakness, hating my body when it didn't perform. Now I train from love, appreciating what my body can do, respecting its limits, enjoying the process rather than just the results. This isn't about abandoning discipline but finding a more sustainable, integrated motivation. Social interactions reveal the alpha mentality's biggest flaws. Watch how self-proclaimed alphas behave in groups, constantly interrupting, dominating conversations, competing for attention. Now watch truly secure individuals. They listen deeply, ask thoughtful questions, and don't need to be the center of attention. The difference is striking. One reformed alpha described his realization. I thought being loud and taking up space made me powerful. But I was overcompensating for feeling small inside. Now I find power in creating space for others, which ironically gives me more influence than when I was desperate for it. Try implementing what I call the integration journal. Each evening, record 3 moments from your day. One where you expressed a quality you consider strong, one where you expressed a quality you consider weak, and one where you noticed yourself judging others for qualities you disown in yourself. Over time, patterns will emerge that help you identify your shadow, those disowned parts seeking integration. Another practice is the trigger inventory. When someone provokes a strong reaction, especially anger or contempt, pause and ask, what quality am I seeing in them that I refuse to acknowledge in myself? This isn't about blaming yourself but understanding the projection mechanism Jung identified as the root of most conflicts. The key throughout is shifting from, how can I demonstrate power, to, how can I become more whole? The first question leads to performance and compensation. The second leads to authentic strength. It's like the difference between a bodybuilder who looks strong in posed photos versus an athlete with functional strength. One is about appearance, the other is about capability. True power isn't about looking unbeatable, it's about remaining effective even when you're vulnerable. The Jungian approach to power transforms our relationship with mortality and meaning. The conventional alpha mentality is, at its core, a denial of death, an attempt to overcome our ultimate powerlessness through displays of control. Jung would argue that true courage comes not from denying our limitations but embracing them as part of our humanity. "I am not what happened to me," he wrote, "I am what I choose to become." One hospice worker I interviewed observed that men who maintained alpha facades throughout their lives often experience the most existential distress when facing death. "They've spent decades avoiding vulnerability," she explained, "so when they can no longer maintain the illusion of control, they have no internal resources." By contrast, those who had integrated their shadow generally approached death with greater equanimity, having already embraced the full spectrum of human experience. The paradox at the heart of Jung's philosophy is that by abandoning the direct pursuit of power, we often find something better, a sense of wholeness so compelling that both strength and vulnerability become integral parts of an authentic life. This shows up clearly in how people respond to failure. Those caught in alpha mentality tend to blame others, make excuses, or double down on controlling behaviors. Those with integrated strength acknowledge mistakes, learn from them, and adapt. I've watched this play out countless times in business settings. The leader who can say, "I was wrong," or "I don't know," paradoxically inspires more confidence than the one who pretends infallibility. Consider how this might transform your approach to personal growth. Instead of pursuing status primarily for validation, pursue wholeness that stretches your capabilities in all directions. The momentary discomfort of acknowledging your limitations creates the conditions for genuine strength. One man I coached deliberately practiced sharing his uncertainties with trusted friends after decades of presenting a flawless facade. "For 3 months I felt like I was betraying everything I stood for," he told me. "But that discomfort pushed me to develop authentic confidence I never had when I was pretending to be perfect." Consider implementing these practices in your daily life. First, practice the shadow acknowledgement. Identify one quality you criticize in others and write down 3 ways you express or suppress this same quality in yourself. Second, transform how you talk about weakness. Replace, "I shouldn't feel this way," with, "I'm curious about why I feel this way." This subtle shift activates integration rather than suppression. Third, seek authentic challenges rather than performance opportunities. Identify one area where you've been avoiding growth because it might make you appear weak or uncertain. Remember Jung's wisdom. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Today, identify one mask you wear that prevents authentic connection with yourself or others. Can you practice removing it even briefly in a safe relationship? Write down what you fear might happen if you showed up more authentically, then challenge these assumptions. The highest form of strength isn't dominating others but mastering yourself through wholeness rather than fragmentation. This journey from performing alpha status to embodying integrated strength isn't easy. Our culture bombards us with images of dominance masked as power. Every movie hero who never shows pain, every business guru promising command through force of personality, every fitness influencer showing impossible standards, they all reinforce the alpha myth. But ask yourself, how many truly fulfilled people do you know who live this way? The happiest, most effective people I've encountered in 20 years of coaching aren't those obsessed with status or control. They're the ones who've done the harder work of embracing their full humanity, strength and vulnerability, certainty and doubt, power and compassion. Jung understood that what we call strength often hides weakness, and what we call weakness often reveals strength. The man who needs to dominate conversations reveals his fear of irrelevance. The leader who can't admit mistakes reveals her terror of inadequacy. The friend who never asks for help reveals his dread of rejection. True power comes not from hiding these fears but from acknowledging them, working with them, and discovering that you can be effective even while feeling afraid. As Jung put it, One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is the genuine alpha path, not dominating others but mastering yourself. This journey doesn't end with personal transformation. It ripples outward into how we raise the next generation. Think about the messages we send boys about strength. Don't cry, man up, don't show weakness. These commands don't create strength, they create fragmentation and fear. What if instead we taught our sons that integration is power? That feeling deeply and thinking clearly can coexist? That vulnerability takes more courage than dominance? One father I worked with described his realization. I was raising my son the same way my father raised me, to be tough, to never show pain. Then I watched him bullying smaller kids and I recognized my shadow in him. He wasn't acting from strength but from fear that weakness would make him unlovable, just like I feared. This father's journey toward wholeness transformed not just himself but his parenting. Now I tell my son that being strong means being whole, feeling everything but choosing your actions wisely. This applies equally to how we raise daughters, often taught to abandon their power to be likable, setting up another harmful binary. True strength doesn't belong to one gender, it belongs to those willing to embrace their full humanity. In your workplace, be the one who changes the culture. When someone shows vulnerability, don't see it as weakness, recognize it as the courage to be whole. When someone admits uncertainty, don't lose confidence in them, gain respect for their honesty. Be the leader who creates psychological safety, where people know they don't need alpha performances to be valued. The ancient Tao Te Ching captured this paradox perfectly. The soft overcomes the hard, the gentle overcomes the rigid. True power isn't brittle, defensive, and unyielding, it's flexible, aware, and integrated. Like water, it finds its way around obstacles rather than shattering against them. So ask yourself today, what would change if you stopped trying to prove your strength and started expressing your wholeness? What relationships would deepen? What creative possibilities would open up? What inner peace might you find? The path isn't easy, it requires facing the parts of yourself you've rejected, but on the other side lies something better than alpha status. Something authentic, sustainable, and truly powerful. The freedom to be fully human. The practical reality of this transformation shows up most clearly in moments of crisis. Those times when our performance masks get stripped away. During a corporate merger I consulted on, I watched two different leadership styles in action. The self-styled alpha executive maintained a facade of absolute certainty, refused to acknowledge problems, and blamed others when things went wrong. His team stopped bringing him crucial information for fear of his reactions. The integrated leader acknowledged concerns openly, shared her own uncertainties while maintaining clear direction, and created space for collaborative problem solving. Within months, the difference in results was unmistakable. This isn't just theoretical, neuroscience now confirms what Jung intuited. When we operate from fight or flight responses, the biological basis of much alpha behavior, our prefrontal cortex responsible for complex thinking, empathy, and creativity literally goes offline. We become less intelligent, less innovative, and less perceptive. True strength means maintaining access to your full cognitive and emotional resources, even under pressure. Consider how this might transform your relationships. Alpha mentality teaches that showing emotional needs makes you weak and unattractive. Yet research consistently shows that emotional intimacy, the ability to be vulnerable with a partner, creates the strongest and most satisfying relationships. One man described his revelation. I spent years playing it cool, never showing how much I cared. I thought that made me powerful. Now I realize I was just protecting myself from rejection while guaranteeing I'd never experience real connection. The most compelling evidence comes from studying genuine leaders across fields. From effective military commanders to transformational business leaders, the pattern is clear. Those who inspire greatest loyalty and performance aren't the most dominant but the most integrated. They combine clear boundaries with genuine care, decisiveness with openness to input, confidence with humility. As Admiral James Stockdale, who survived 7 years as a prisoner of war, put it, "You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality." This is the heart of integrated strength, not denial of difficulty, but the capacity to face it while maintaining your core. Not the absence of fear, but the ability to function effectively alongside it. Not dominance over others, but mastery of yourself. The ultimate test of this philosophy comes in how we handle our innermost fears. Every person alive faces the same fundamental anxieties: fear of inadequacy, fear of rejection, fear of meaninglessness. The alpha mentality tries to outrun these fears through constant proof of dominance. But as Jung understood, what we resist persists. Those fears don't disappear. They go underground and control us from the shadows. I witnessed this transformation in a military veteran who had embodied traditional alpha values throughout his career. "In combat, I never showed fear," he told me. "I was the rock everyone depended on." But in civilian life, his inability to acknowledge vulnerability led to alcoholism, failed relationships, and eventually suicidal thoughts. "I thought acknowledging fear made me weak. I didn't realize suppressing it was what was truly destroying me." Through therapy that embraced Jung's approach to shadow integration, he found a different kind of strength: the courage to face his fears rather than hide from them. This integration extends to how we view success itself. The alpha mentality frames life as a zero-sum competition. Winners and losers, alphas and betas. But the most meaningful achievements often come through collaboration, not domination. The greatest innovators aren't lone alpha geniuses, but those who create environments where diverse perspectives flourish. The most effective teams aren't hierarchies of dominance, but networks of mutual respect and complementary strengths. Look carefully at those who project the strongest alpha image, the loudest voices on social media, the most aggressive personalities in meetings. Behind that performance almost invariably lies deep insecurity. True confidence doesn't need to announce itself constantly. It's like gravity, a quiet force that influences everything around it without making demands for attention. The path forward isn't about abandoning strength but redefining it. It's about recognizing that integration is more powerful than dominance, that wholeness creates more lasting impact than fragmentation. As Jung himself put it, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. This is the real alpha mentality, not the one they sell you in books and seminars, but the authentic power that comes from facing yourself completely and choosing integrity over image. The transformation from alpha performance to integrated strength ripples through every aspect of your life, including your physical well-being. Consider how traditional alpha culture approaches health: pushing through pain, ignoring warning signs, treating the body like an enemy to be conquered. This approach doesn't create sustainable strength. It leads to injury, burnout, and disconnection. A former professional athlete I interviewed described his realization: "For years I thought being tough meant ignoring my body's signals. Now I understand that true toughness includes listening to those signals and responding wisely. My performance actually improved when I stopped trying to dominate my body and started partnering with it." This same principle applies to mental health. The alpha mentality frames psychological struggles as weaknesses to be hidden or overcome through sheer willpower. But as suicide rates among men continue to climb, the devastating consequences of this approach become clear. Those who cannot admit distress cannot receive help. Those who cannot acknowledge vulnerability cannot build resilience. Jung recognized that healing begins with acceptance, not denial. The strongest response to psychological difficulty isn't pretending it doesn't exist. It's having the courage to face it directly. Perhaps most importantly, this shift transforms how we measure our own worth. Alpha mentality creates a constant comparison trap, always judging yourself against others, always needing to be better than to feel valuable. This guarantees perpetual insecurity because there will always be someone stronger, richer, more successful by some metric. Integrated strength finds value in wholeness rather than superiority. It recognizes that your worth isn't determined by your rank in some imaginary hierarchy but by your capacity to live authentically and contribute meaningfully. One business leader described his shift. "I used to think success meant being the alpha in the room, the richest, the most powerful, the one everyone deferred to. Now I measure success by whether I've lived according to my values, developed meaningful relationships, and made a positive difference." The irony is that this approach has actually brought more traditional success than when I was desperately chasing status. This is the ultimate promise of Jung's approach, not that you'll become some perfect specimen of dominance, but that you'll discover something infinitely more valuable: the freedom to be fully yourself and the strength that comes from wholeness rather than performance. Consider implementing these practices in your daily life. First, practice the shadow acknowledgement. Identify one quality you criticize in others and write down 3 ways you express or suppress this same quality in yourself. Second, transform how you talk about weakness. Replace "I shouldn't feel this way" with "I'm curious about why I feel this way." This subtle shift activates integration rather than suppression. Third, seek authentic challenges rather than performance opportunities. Identify one area where you've been avoiding growth because it might make you appear weak or uncertain. Remember Jung's wisdom: the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Today, identify one mask you wear that prevents authentic connection with yourself or others. Can you practice removing it, even briefly, in a safe relationship? Write down what you fear might happen if you showed up more authentically, then challenge these assumptions. The highest form of strength isn't dominating others but mastering yourself through wholeness rather than fragmentation. Stop chasing alpha status and start pursuing integration. Subscribe to join our community of people committed to authentic strength. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that real power comes from wholeness, not dominance. And remember, every time you choose authenticity over performance, you're not showing weakness. You're demonstrating the rarest kind of courage. The courage to be fully human in a world obsessed with masks. Until next time, embrace your shadow and discover your true strength.